Thanks for staying with us. The families of struggle icons Chief Albert Luthuli and Mlungisi Griffiths Mxenge have welcomed the reopening of inquests into their deaths. The reopening comes after new evidence was presented to the National Prosecuting Authority. The High Court in Pietermaritzburg was set to begin hearings today following a decision by prosecutors in KwaZulu-Natal. However, the inquest into Mxenge's death was provisionally adjourned to the 17th of June, while the inquest into Luthuli's death will continue tomorrow.
The inquest is going to be reopened formally in court. So the prosecutor will provide a statement, an opening statement, and the judge will also provide. In that address, one will get a sense of what is to come for the next few days. These inquests have been set until the 16th of May. So then once court proceedings starts, you'll get a better idea. But obviously the reopening of the inquest means that it's new evidence that will be led before these courts. Part of the NPA's approach was to update the families continuously, so that they are aware that we are working towards this particular goal. And if you find out how we actually came here, it's basically the families sort of express their dissatisfaction with the original inquest, and that's hence the NPA is now applying to have it reopened.
All right, let's take you now into, of course, some of the moments that led up to this particular moment. At the same time, also bring you the significance of these two individuals who now have these, their deaths being probed yet again as to, really what happened here, especially when you think about some of the circumstances that the NPA talks about that are surrounding the deaths here and what could potentially may have happened. And let's start first with Chief Albert Luthuli and just bring up, of course, the information there as we are looking at the significance of these particular figures. You're looking at Chief Albert Luthuli, is an anti-apartheid activist, of course, we all know, advocating for equal rights among all racial groups, born in 1898 and serving as the President General of the ANC. This is between 1952 to 1967, and he's had a total of 4 banning orders during his lifetime, also charged with high treason there in 1956. And there have been calls for the 28th of March to be observed as a national day of mourning in honor of the Groutville massacre victims. And this, of course, where he was then subsequently arrested. This is in 1960, as we're taking a step back in time. A man that is quite significant, especially when you talk about the history of the ANC. And then at the same time, you look at the big moment when he's awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. This is in 1961, quite a huge moment for South Africa there. And in 1966, Senator Robert F. Kennedy visiting him at his home in Groutville in KwaDukuza, and quite a big moment as well. And on the 21st of July, 1967, he was allegedly hit by a train, which is believed to have been the incident that caused his untimely passing. And right now, those are the very circumstances that are being probed. And also looking at the inquest that was held in 1967 under the apartheid government, of course, no evidence that disclosed any criminal culpability on the employees of the South African Railways or anyone else. That's what this particular inquest found. And now you are looking at an inquest that has now been opened, being reopened at this moment in our history in order to be able to make sense of what happened there. And it's going to be interesting to see what kind of evidence the NPA is going to be relying on here. Canny Maphanga is on standby to talk to us about that, but also Griffiths Mxenge, a human rights lawyer born on the 27th of February 1935 and convicted of being a member of the ANC after it was banned in 1960. And he was also sentenced to 2 years imprisonment and then completing his LLB degree upon his return and fearlessly defending the victims of apartheid. And this is something, of course, that would not have gone down well with the government of the day there. And he was then detained and banned on frequent occasions. And also on the 19th of November 1981, that's when he was brutally murdered. And posthumously, he was awarded the National Order of Luthuli in silver And then in 1997, Butana Nofemela, David Tshikalange, and Dirk Coetzee were found guilty of his murder but granted amnesty by the TRC before they could be sentenced. And then now the inquest has been reopened into his death but has been adjourned to the 17th of June. And we stay with this and speak to our reporters who've been tracking these two inquests for us. And that is Canny Maphanga, who's with us here in studio. She was tracking the developments around Luthuli, as well as Simphiwe Makhanya, joining us on the line from KwaZulu-Natal, and he was covering the Griffiths Mxenge part of the inquest. Good evening to you both, and thank you so much for your time. I'll start with you, Simphiwe. Let's talk about, of course, the significance of a day like today, but we understand that the two remaining men who were found guilty of killing Mxenge have requested that the police fund their legal defense. Tell us how that came about and what also came out in court.
It was quite an today for the office, as you have indicated. It was quite a hot proceedings in terms of the courtroom. The leader of the evidence leader rather told the judge that the key witnesses that have been subpoenaed to give evidence in this particular matter have requested the legal services from the South African Police Service. You would recall that these key witnesses were members of the SABC then, who were working under a unit, a security branch, which was under the SABC. So they have requested that they be given legal representation in order for them to take part in the proceedings fairly. But of course, Bongiwe, we also did speak to the family of Griffiths Mxenge, which basically indicated that they welcome the recent developments, and they acknowledge, though, that this is going to be a tough period for them in terms of the information that is expected to come out of the proceedings, but they feel that in order for them to get the closure and finality on the matter, it is quite important that they are aware of the details of who did what. And of course, if indeed the people who orchestrated the killings are still alive, they said that they want them to be brought to book for that matter.
And I want us to talk about the family a bit more in just a moment, but let me bring in Canny as we talk about another inquest, Canny, quite significant as well. And that is around the ANC, President General, that's Luthuli, Chief Albert Luthuli. And when you listen to what has been, obviously said so far, is that you've got the National Prosecuting Authority that is suggesting that there could have been some foul play there as far as his death is concerned. Let's talk about the evidence that they're going to be relying upon now.
Well, what's fortunate for the NPA with respect to the Chief Luthuli inquest is that the claim is so extraordinary that was made in the inquest of 1967, which was that he was struck by a train in Stanga in KwaZulu-Natal rather. Now, the basis of that claim is that the NPA is stating that they're going to provide evidence which paints a stark contrast to that claim that was initially made in that initial inquest. Now, the benefit here is that they're stating that an event took place which resulted in the cause of death. That can be tested, or the probability of such a scenario can be tested, and we've seen that the NPA intends to bring evidence that will test such a claim. So they will be bringing a locomotive driver, someone who's an expert in locomotives, someone who can explain the kind of impact or assess the injuries that could take place if one was hit by a train, what that would look like. And we've heard through the at least two witnesses that they've brought here. These are police officers that were brought onto this matter in 2019 to investigate the circumstances behind the death of Chief Luthuli, is that the original inquest record, if we could put it that way, didn't have critical annexures of the photographs of the crime scene and the photographs of the post-mortem of Chief Luthuli, which raises questions as to why that information would not be included in that inquest. And of course, we have the Captain Makhanya, who was the IO that was initially allocated this matter in 2019, stating that the notes in the post-mortem reports that is included in that initial inquest report suggest that the injuries that they've noted in those notes are not consistent with the injuries of a person who would have been hit by a train. So already the inquest has hit the ground running in testing the scientific and mathematical probability of the claim that Chief Luthuli would have been or struck by a train, as claimed in the official reports at the time, stated as the cause of death.
And Kenny, staying with that, right? They talk about injuries to the arms and injuries to the hands, and suggesting that possibly for the NPA, this may have been defensive injuries, possibly. And I suppose that's going to be quite critical for them to actually prove and to demonstrate as they continue then to, give their own version of events in this particular inquest.
Absolutely. They're challenging the credibility of the inquest, which the NPA charges was a subversion of the facts and the evidence, which they also contend that the key figures that presided over that initial inquest colluded in under a apartheid regime where that would have been expected when dealing with these kinds of cases. Now it's about getting the true facts behind the passing of Chief Luthuli, to record history accurately, but of course bring healing and closure to the Luthuli family, who have been waiting for decades to get answers on the untimely passing of their loved one, who was a key figure in the liberation struggle and a key figure in the ANC ranks as well.
And Kenny, I'm gonna come back to that, and I want to circle back to what the family had to say. But Simphiwe, when you look at how Mxenge is said to have died, brutally stabbed about 45 times, and his throat slit in Durban, and this, of course, the reopening of this inquest, we hear, was a collaboration between the NPA KZN TRC unit, the NPA TRC unit at the National Office, the Directorate of Priority Crime Investigation, as well as the National Archives. Let's talk about this process now, because you say that the family are pinning their hopes on this particular matter, saying that for them this potentially could result in the closure that they're looking for. But when you speak to the NPA, let's speak about the work that they would have done behind closed doors in order to ensure that they get to this moment and get the desired result.
Look, with this particular death that we are talking about, of course, you'd recall that it happened in 1981, so it's been a long time coming. The NPA, speaking to us earlier on today, did indicate that it has taken them years to put together the necessary evidence that they hope will be able, to be presented successfully during the inquest, and that will ultimately lead to perhaps criminal charges being laid to those who are.
All right, the line there to Simphiwe.
But of course,
go ahead, Simphiwe.
But of course, when you would the sentiment from the family is of want finality on the matter. They want closure on the matter, and they have been liaising with the NPA with regards to their dissatisfaction regarding the version that they were told regarding the passing of Griffiths Mxenge. So they hope that once the information has been presented during the inquest, that will sort of give them peace in terms of dealing with what has transpired, and also bringing to book those who may be responsible for that.
And Kenny, you speak about the family. Simphiwe was telling us about Griffiths Mxenge's family and how they're looking forward to get some answers here. And I suppose the, Chief Luthuli's family would be the same, and really just hoping to know what happened.
I think it's the same for Chief Luthuli's family, but for many families that are still seeking answers on their loved ones that disappeared without a trace or who died in suspicious circumstances during the apartheid regime. A question has to be reflected on why it's taking so long for the NPA to bring some of these cases emanating from the TRC committee to this level where you see it being reopened by the NPA, where they seek, I guess, a fact-finding mission as to what happened to the various loved ones. So, of course, while you're seeing some progress in these matters, these are high-profile figures where it has been some time before the family could seek answers, but there are many other families that may not enjoy the same titles or ranks as that of the families that we're discussing today, but would also like to heal and secure justice for their loved ones.
And just on that point, Kenny, because I was going to get to it, right, to say that For the NPA, is it an issue of investigations here? Is it an issue of capacity? What is the issue? Because you as you say, you do have a lot of struggle stalwarts families who are saying that you need to now investigate. We need to move. It's been over 30 years into our democracy. By now, we should have seen more cases that are being brought as opposed to the pace that things are moving.
Well, one can understand the issue of resources and capacity in dealing with such complex cases because you're investigating matters 30 years after the fact, sometimes 60 years after the fact. But there is merit in some of the perceptions that there was a lack of a political will to address these cases. And that's why you've seen so many of them gathering dust over time before you see them reopened by the NPA. So we have seen pressure, we have seen political pressure to answer to some of these deaths and the circumstances surrounding these deaths because it's important for the history, the heritage of this country, the vindication of these struggle heroes and getting the truth behind how they passed during the apartheid regime.
All right, let me thank you both for your time. Simphiwe, thank you so much for even wrapping that for us. That was SABC News reporters, Canny Maphanga here with us in studio, as well as Simphiwe Makhanya. We'll continue to track these stories for you. Quite an important moment in the country's history. And I suppose for the families as well, who are hoping to find some closure and finality as far as these matters are concerned.